As police crack down on the protests, journalists have also found themselves being targeted.
Thank you. Stefan was shooting at you. We're press!
DW's correspondent Stefan Simons, who you see here, was shot at with rubber bullets in Minneapolis over the weekend. In a second incident, Simons and his crew were shot at again as they tried to drive away from police. He says he's been harassed by police several times while reporting on the protests. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas has insisted that journalists must be allowed to do their job reporting on the unrest in the U.S.
With regard to the incidents involving Deutsche Welle, of which we have also been made aware, we will contact U.S. authorities to find out more about the circumstances. We remain firmly committed. Journalists must be able to carry out their task, which is independent coverage of events, without endangering their safety. Democratic states, under the rule of law, have to meet the highest standards when it comes to protecting freedom of the press.
All right, let's get more on this story now. We can speak with Nick Waters from the investigative group Bellingcat, which has been collecting and analyzing the instances of violence against journalists during these protests. And he joins us from London. Hi, Nick. Take us through some of the examples of how journalists are being targeted.
Well, so far we've collected 106 examples of violence against journalists. And although in some cases it's clear that these journalists simply got caught between protesters and police, in the majority of cases, we're seeing them being targeted by police despite clearly being journalists. We've seen journalists being arrested, being shot at with rubber bullets, being targeted with tear gas, and being hit with batons and shields, despite it being very clear that they are journalists.
Nick, is it clear that this is definitely deliberate?
Yes, in multiple examples, it's very, very clear. So, for example, when the CNN crew were arrested live on air, the clips you played with the Deutsche Welle film crew, you've got a big camera, big light there, very clearly press. You have multiple other examples where it is very clearly a journalist. There is nobody else in the immediate vicinity, and the police are deliberately targeting press.
Nick, some media have accused the president, the White House, of creating mistrust in news organizations. We're seeing video right now of a CNN crew arrested live on air. News organizations and journalists, people have said that the president has fomented anger against them. Do your investigations actually show this, prove that there's been an uptick in attacks and harassment of journalists?
And what we can say is that in the last few days, there have been well over 100 attacks on journalists. And I don't think you can divorce that from the President of the United States spending the last few years describing the press as the enemy of the people, and creating a culture in which the media are blamed for the ills of America and are a legitimate target. I don't think you can separate his statements, the statements of the most powerful man in the country, in the world, from the kind of violence that we're seeing being deployed against journalists.
All right, Nick Waters from Bellingcat joining us from London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, the wave of protests against the killing of George Floyd in the U.S. is resonating in other parts of the world. Thousands have been taking to the streets in solidarity, while also turning the spotlight on injustice in their own societies.
A symbol of pride, strength, and unity. In Auckland, New Zealanders performed the haka, counting themselves one tribe with protesters more than 12,000 kilometers away in the US. The death of George Floyd has shocked many around the world, leading to calls for action. Perth on Australia's west coast, the same chant, the same cause, and an opportunity to highlight similar problems at home.
Our goal is just to bring recognition to the protests happening in America at the moment, the big movement that's occurring, and show solidarity with the black community over there, and also bring light to all the issues that happen here. There's over 400 plus Indigenous deaths in custody that are not being investigated or any further. So that is a huge issue, and everyone keeps saying, oh, Australia is so different, but it's not really. And so that's what we're here to talk about and just start a conversation.
They assembled too in the Netherlands. Activists are planning to replicate this Amsterdam demonstration in other cities.
George Floyd!
Over in Ireland, a march from Dublin city centre to the US Embassy, where they took a knee, employing the symbol of protest. Unlike in America, so far these protests abroad have been largely peaceful, despite concerns over breaches of social distancing guidelines. During the current global pandemic, injustice is also being highlighted as a threat to life.